Hello and welcome. I want to talk about my new favorite DC Rebirth comic. It has been Aquaman. Art cast rotating. The letter and writer have been the same throughout. Abnett is penning this just beautiful story. It is taking the king of Atlantis, our Arthur Aquaman, and placing it in a political drama with the U.S. The initial chunk is him dealing with a bit of a skirmish with Black Manta because that's like a prerequisite, I guess, for Aquaman. But in doing so, the U.S. reads that as a terror strike on the U.S. And he's saying it wasn't a terrorist attack; it was a criminal attack. I've honestly been questioning, just with politics in general lately, like, really what is the difference between a terrorist and a criminal? And when you start seeing it through political eyes and realizing it's more about drawing political lines and whatnot, like if it's a U.S. citizen who's terrorizing the U.S., it is somewhat pedantic. But if you're looking at it from other nations and how they're dealing with it, and if it's someone acting rogue outside of the country's interest and they're not a combatant, and how these countries organize that's kind of interesting to me, and it made me make these connections to real world events, which is something you kind of want in comics, but not like directly, but just through the ideas and concepts. And this has a lot of crazy superhero fun. Black Manta is being recruited by Nemo, which is an acronym for something. I'm sure it's in the comics past. I have not read much Aquaman beyond this. The only other Aquaman I've read, Aquaman is some of the Jeff Johns run, which is really playing on, oh, Aquaman's being seen as a joke, but he's a really serious character, guys. And it's like, okay, that was fun for a couple issues, but let's pick up the pace here. And it got somewhere, but it never did tons for me. It was an interesting read. I read through Throne of Atlantis, and Throne of Atlantis was interesting to actually reference it in here, because that's part of the building of this. So this Aquaman is playing off of the New 52 continuity in a way. But having not read half of that, I can honestly tell you, you can pick this up from Rebirth issue 1 and then go for it. That number scheme. We'll be past it one day. Man, this Aquaman run is great. Also, what's really great is the relationship between Arthur and Mara, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and her as being essentially the queen, but how she relates and brings in more the side of Atlantis than kind of this man between worlds, which is Aquaman, is fascinating. It really shows that there is this other culture, and we have creators who have really kind of thought through, and they have characters in Atlantis that aren't portrayed in the way that a lot of the other cultures are in comics, where they speak very haughty, almost trying to be Shakespearean, but never obviously quite on that level. But in a way, no, these Atlanteans spoke like people, but they have different priorities and agendas and a view of life, and in some ways very akin to how the best Wonder Woman comics are, where the citizens of the Mascara speak like people, but are their own characters with their own views, and they belong to this group and not the other group. And I have just been blown away with this comic. I mean, coming in with no expectations is great, but then to just have a comic that I'm reading and I'm just more energized about than pretty much anything else I'm reading. And I've said it before, this DC Rebirth has a lot of good comics. The question is to sort out, because it takes some time to sort out which are going to be the great comics. And this is the only one I can definitively say so far has a lot of elements of a great comic, and has been a great comic so far. So, more than any other DC book, and I want to find people to talk to about this, man, Aquaman. I'm in. Crazy. Aquaman. That.